Hey YouTube, my name is Natalie. I'm a criminal defense attorney and welcome to my channel. And we're going to be digging in today why Hannah Gutierrez Reed received the maximum possible penalty of 18 months in prison for involuntary manslaughter in relation to her role as the armorer on the movie set of Rust, where one of the workers on that movie set, Helena Hutchins, was killed as a result of renowned actor Alec Baldwin pulling the trigger. So Hannah Gutierrez Reed's job on the set of Rust was to ensure the safety of the firearms. The jury believed and found that due to her negligence, basically her failure to do her job as the armorer, the gun that was safe was rendered unsafe because live ammunition was brought onto the scene. And when Baldwin pulled the trigger, that ended up killing Helena Hutchins. Now, because Hannah Gutierrez Reed had no prior criminal convictions, the expectations of most legal analysts, myself included, was that Hannah Gutierrez Reed was going to receive a lower sentence or even possibly a suspended sentence where she would be placed on probation with the understanding that as long as she didn't commit a new offense, she would likely not go back to jail. And the reason that I particularly thought that she wouldn't get any additional jail time is because she was incarcerated pending her sentencing. So the judge did not give her time to prepare for sentencing in the community. She immediately incarcerated her. And a lot of the times when that happens, what I normally anticipate is that this person with a very minimum record will be given the slap on the wrist of the initial incarceration, but then be allowed to be released at a later point in time. However, in this case, it did come out that Hannah Gutierrez Reed had several jail phone calls in which she expressed a lack of remorse. A lot of the feedback that I received was that some people think people's jail phone calls should not be held against them. However, there is extensive case law across the United States that people do not have an expectation of privacy in their jail phone calls. And anything that a criminal defendant says can and will be used against them, even up to and including the sentencing. So even after someone has been convicted, but if they make statements that are incriminating or show a lack of remorse, those statements can be used against them. That is within the rules of evidence under the statement of a party opponent or the statement of the criminal defendant. All of those statements are able to come in as long as the other rules of evidence are not violated in introducing them. And so almost every single criminal defendant that is incarcerated is put on notice that their jail phone calls are being recorded. So, for example, every time a inmate makes a phone call, they'll get a notice that says this call is being recorded. Then if they the jail as well as the prosecutors are able to listen into those jail phone calls because the inmate does not have an expectation of privacy. Now, had Hannah Gutierrez Reed not been incarcerated and instead allowed to stay home and then later on be sentenced, her private phone calls not on the jail phone would not be admissible. However, here, because her phone calls were made on the jail phone, she had no expectation of privacy in those phone calls. So what were the phone calls that landed Hannah Gutierrez Reed in hot water and showed that she had a lack of remorse and therefore prompted the judge to give her the maximum possible sentence? In the state's summary, they say that Hannah says that the other girls in the jail were saying, quote, "I can't believe they threw your pretty little white ass in there for nothing." Hannah says, like, "Yeah, girl, for real." She says that so far she is built for jail and likes tap water. She likes hard beds and the cat food isn't too bad every day. So in that summation, what the prosecution is pointing out is that Hannah is not taking incarceration very seriously. Let's say that these jail calls had gone another way. Now, I'm going to talk to you guys later about, as a criminal defense attorney and a public defender, how I routinely tell my clients not to talk about their case on the jail phone, but people routinely do not listen to that, right? Well, if you're going to talk about your case on the jail phone, you should at least express remorse. And here she did not express remorse. In fact, she's almost kind of challenging the judge. Like, yeah, go ahead and lock me up because I don't care about how hard this bed is. I don't care about the cat food that we have to eat here, which is, her being dramatic by saying cat food. But, jail food is pretty bad. Might as well be cat food, right? It's pretty gross. And so I don't care. I don't mind. It's not bothering me. Now, say on the other hand, she had said something along the lines of, this is horrible. I've really learned my lesson about, safety on the set. I can't believe this has happened. I'm so sad about this. I'm so sad about what happened. Then more than likely the judge would have seen that she was not only remorseful, but that the temporary solution of putting her in jail is really having an effect on her. She's being influenced by the fact that she's in an uncomfortable position of being incarcerated. And maybe the judge will say, lesson learned, I will release you now. However, what Gutierrez Reed instead said was that this was having no effect on her and that she was standing up to the harsh conditions of incarceration. Judges don't like that. That tends to prove that, okay, well, then I have no problem keeping you in jail. So really bad for her to have said those things on the jail calls. The next summation that the state provides of the jail calls is Hannah was talking to a male on the other end of the line. And the male says that when Hannah was taken away, that mom said, this is some bullshit. Hannah laughs loudly, right, to her being taken away to jail. And now some of you may think this is not fair for Hannah to be convicted of these crimes. And I can understand why you would feel that way. However, we have to remember that Helena Hutchins was killed as a result of this case, right? And whether or not you think that Hannah is responsible, Helena Hutchins was killed. This is a serious case. It's not a laughing matter, right? So Hannah laughs loudly. He tells her, the male, that mom did, and Hannah says that she was glad her mom stood up and said something. Hannah laughs about all of this. So her mother said this is bullshit in court. And so the male that she's speaking to is basically encouraging her. And Hannah is showing a lack of remorse here and saying that she's glad that her mother spoke out in court. Again, judges are not going to like that because the role of the judge is to be the one who sees to the courtroom decorum. So they are the ones that are in charge of making sure that everyone behaves in the appropriate manner. The outbursts are not appropriate. So a judge is not going to take kindly to somebody turning around and basically saying, I don't care, it didn't bother me, and I'm glad that there was an outburst. The next summation is that the state says the male who Hannah is speaking to says he has been to jail before. Hannah says she didn't think she would like it, but now she does. So what is a judge going to feel when they hear you like being in jail? They'll accept the challenge and say, okay, well, then you can stay in jail. All of these are very ill-advised statements from a criminal defendant. In another recording, Hannah says that she can't believe that the judge put her in jail. Hannah talks about the jury and how they only took 2 fucking hours and how she got the book thrown at her. She says that everyone lied on the stand except for 2 or 3 experts. She talks about the witnesses and how they all lied. She says that she didn't need to be shaking the dummies all the time. So they lied about her shaking the dummy rounds, that she should have been shaking the dummy rounds to make sure that they are in fact dummy rounds and not live rounds. And she's saying that those witnesses are liars. Now, I'm going to come from this from the perspective of someone who represents a criminal defendant. I understand that someone put in the position of being a criminal defendant and then being placed in jail is going to be upset about that. Someone being found guilty, they're going to be upset about that. They're not going to be happy with the jury whatsoever. However, expressing these things on the jail phone has several negative effects. One of those negative effects is that the judge upholds and reveres the jury system. So even if you as the defendant don't think that the prosecution was right and don't think that so if you as the defendant don't think that the jury got it right, that is your right to feel that way on the inside, to say those things to your attorney, to talk about your appeal strategy. But the judge, on the other hand, thinks You got your day in court. You got a fair trial. I ensured that you got a fair trial. And now you're mocking the entire system. And because of that, I think that you don't really have remorse or take this seriously. One thing to understand, particularly with Hannah Gutierrez Reed, is that a lot of the disdain for her behavior in this case came from the belief that she was not taking the case seriously. So even from the very beginning, when she was interviewed by police, it didn't seem like she was taking it seriously. From her statement at sentencing, it did not seem like she was taking it seriously. Maybe because she just didn't see how she really had any fault. But because the case involves the death of Helena Hutchins, someone actually died, a certain level of somberness and seriousness, I think, is required in a case like this, even when you're maintaining your innocence, which she has every right to do. So I know that it's difficult for someone to really feel like, I am innocent. I am not the one who's ultimately responsible. These witnesses are lying on me. It is just not good trial strategy, practice, or sentencing strategy for a criminal defendant to say those things on the jail phone. And it can come across as heartless, and it can also come across as a lack of remorse. You can have remorse for something that you don't think that you're responsible for when someone dies, right? So if someone's dead, you can just be sorry that the person is dead and express that, but say, I didn't, I'm not responsible for this ultimately. I didn't break any of my duties. I did everything I was supposed to do, but I'm extremely sorry that this person has passed away, and I'm sorry that it has come to me being convicted, and I look forward to my appeal being successful, right? Like those type of things. And it's really hard in the moment for a person to incorporate that when this is their life and their freedom. She is the one that's sitting in jail. She is coping with the situation. However, you have to think about the fact that these jail calls are recorded, and the prosecution will listen to them. And if there's something good in there for the prosecution, they're gonna play it for the court in sentencing. And almost anything is admissible in sentencing. There's very relaxed rules about what the prosecution can and cannot use in sentencing. They can use almost anything. And so for that reason, it's really important that she not have said those things, but she did. And I think that's what led to her getting this 18-month sentence. In the state's next summation of this particular jail call, they say that she complains about what happened on set and says people are still going to die on set. She complains about Gabby Pickle. She complains about the jury and how people who got immunity and had pending lawsuits. Okay, and I understand her complaining about all of those things, right? Especially because there was an overriding concern about safety on set outside of her role as armorer. However, she was the hired and paid armorer on set. She did have a certain level of responsibility. And once again, the recorded phone call is just not the place to air these grievances. A letter to your attorney, a phone call with your attorney, an in-person conversation with your attorney, but not a recorded jail call with your family and friends. And another thing to note here is that you can say anything to your attorney about your case because they cannot record your phone calls with your attorney. Sometimes that might happen by accident. They are required to disregard it, to not listen to it, and it could not be used in court. So those would be the only phone calls that would be protected, phone calls with her attorney because of the attorney-client privilege. That is the place with us, your attorney, to really let it out. I'm so frustrated that I was convicted. These people got up there and they lied about me. But it's not the place to do it on a recorded jail call. Think of it this way. And I'm not just talking to criminal defendants here. I'm talking to loved ones, family members. You want to talk to your family about the case. You might have no interaction with the criminal justice system other than this loved one who's incarcerated. Let them save it for their attorney, because talking on the jail phone is like talking to the prosecutor. It's like talking to the judge. It's like calling up the judge and saying, "Judge, you're stupid, the jury is stupid, and all the witnesses lied, and you conducted an unfair trial." That's what that is like. And so while I see why so many people are saying it's not fair, that this should be used against her, what does it have to do with the actual case? We have to recognize that remorse is one of the factors in considering sentencing, and sentencing has a lot of different factors that are considered, but remorse is one of them. And showing a lack of remorse on a recorded line is just not a good call. The state surmises the next jail call and says she wishes TMZ would shut up and that literally she is fine. She complains about the Washington Post and how if they talk to any worker in there, they would all say she is happy and bubbly. So once again, showing a lack of remorse. You are incarcerated because your role as the armorer was to make sure that people were safe on set from these guns, and you rendered the gun unsafe and someone died. But you're fine and you're happy and bubbly in jail. No judge is going to want to think, let's release this person back onto the street. They're going to want to keep you in for the maximum sentence, and that's what happened here. And again, I'm not making a judgment on if that's wrong or that's right. That's for you to kind of decide in your own mind and in the comments section. But what I am saying is that ultimately that is going to lead to problems. In the next jail phone call, she talks about being a felon and how it's going to work with all of his guns and how she isn't sure how it will work. She says that he, the person she's talking to, can put the guns in a safe and he can tell them that she doesn't know the combo. So basically kind of plotting and scheming how she and the person she's talking to can still possess guns, even though now she's a felon and she's unable to possess guns. Once again, just showing kind of not only a lack of remorse, but a lack of seriousness of what's happened, because you, like every other felon, should not have guns in your vicinity, not even in a safe, and plotting how you can do something you're not supposed to do and get around it it's just not a good look. Okay. She goes back to TMZ and how she is built for jail. Hannah says that if she is subpoenaed to Baldwin's trial, she will not show up. You will not have a choice. And this is expressing that you're not going to follow a court order, because a subpoena is a court order. You do not have a choice to not show up to court when you are subpoenaed to come to trial. Mom says that she was held in jail for 3 weeks for contempt. Hannah complains that she shouldn't be subpoenaed if Baldwin didn't show up for her, right? So once again, just a lack of remorse. In the next jail phone call, she says that the judge is giving her time for no reason. Someone died. It's certainly a reason. Did I think at the outset before these jail phone calls she should get the max? No. Do I still think she should get the max? I don't necessarily agree, honestly. And you guys may see, you got to remember, I'm a public defender. I see things a little bit differently than other people. I don't agree with her getting the max. I just know how we got there. I understand judges to an extent, and I think this is how we got there. She says the judge isn't fair and we're going to the Supreme Court. Once again, not smart to say when you're about to be sentenced by the judge and you know that it's recorded, and so the judge is likely to hear it. Not very smart. Hannah doesn't understand why the judge locked her up when she was on terms of release. She locked you up because you were convicted and you become a flight risk after you're convicted. Hannah says she's trying to get Carmela, Jason Bowles' paralegal, to talk to the family of Helena about coming to sentencing to speak on her behalf. I don't think anything is wrong with saying that or asking for that, because if you have a relationship with them and you think that if they come to court and speak on your behalf, it could help you, I don't think anything is wrong with that necessarily. It's not disparaging anyone on either side. Hannah talks about the friends she is making and how she is having fun. She says she doesn't want to go to prison for 13 months, but it is what it is. Hannah is saying she is having more fun in jail than the other parties to the call, did. So the first part, some of this is her coping, obviously. I'm having fun. I'm hanging out with friends. Don't worry about me. I'm okay. But then saying you're having more fun in jail than the person that you're talking to. Again, someone died. That's kind of callous, right? Kind of a lack of remorse. I would think that you wouldn't want to talk about that on the recorded line because it can come across as though you have not learned your lesson. Hannah says jail is not like summer camp, but it's kind of like summer camp. It's almost like she's taunting the judge here. It's recorded. You're being told it's recorded and you're saying that. I'm sure that's not what she means to do, but that's ultimately what she did. Jail is like summer camp, whatever. Give me the time. I don't care. That's how it's coming across. And again, I think that this just goes to a lack of maturity on Miss Gutierrez Reed's part. The same reason that I don't think that she should have been the one to be the armorer, because it doesn't seem like she was mature enough for that role. This seems like nepotism gone extremely wrong. However, this is something she said, and I think that it hurt her. Hannah says that everything is going to get reviewed and that she feels like people were paid off to look the other way. Hannah goes into some sort of conspiracy theory about how she was used as a pawn and it's not too bad in jail. So you're insinuating that the prosecution is paying off witnesses to testify against you. Very unseemly accusation. That's a very serious accusation that maybe a non-legal professional wouldn't realize that is an extremely terrible and serious accusation to make against a prosecutor. You better have some evidence to back that up. Now, expert witnesses are normally paid, and there were quite a few expert witnesses, but if you're implying that the civilian witnesses were paid, that's not good, right? And so that is going to upset a judge, and that's going to make a prosecutor seek the maximum possible penalty against you if you're saying that this prosecutor is, manipulating witnesses in some way. Hannah complains about what was allowed at trial, what wasn't allowed. Hannah says that the judge is terrible. Well, again, you can complain about what was allowed at trial and what wasn't allowed. And I don't think most prosecutors would try to use that. It's where she starts to disparage the judge, the jury, the prosecution, and the witnesses, and a lack of remorse. That's where it starts to become more relevant to the actual sentencing. She says the judge is terrible and Carrie got together with the judge and they were against her. So she's accusing the judge of colluding with people against her. And she's accusing the judge of being unethical in deciding her case. And in doing so, I really think that she walked herself into a terrible situation here. Okay. So Hannah complains about how fast the jury deliberated, which I would complain about that too. If you get found not guilty after only 2 hours of deliberation, you're going to wonder to yourself, did they really consider my case? Did they really consider all of the evidence, right? So that's understandable, but you complain to your attorney about that. You don't complain about that on the recorded line. But I understand that complaint, right? It doesn't just stop there, though. Hannah says that everyone who testified was given immunity, had a lawsuit pending, or was part of the problem. She calls, excuse me here, this is a direct quote. She calls the jury retarded. When they say a jury of your peers, they mean fucking retards. And Hannah, girl, some of us were out here rooting for you that you wouldn't get the maximum penalty because I think there was a systemic issue on that set, including the hiring of you. I don't think you ever should have been hired. But my goodness, to use those disparaging words when talking about the jury simply because you don't agree with them, it's going to sound like you're cold and callous and rude and lacking in remorse. I keep going back to that because a show of remorse is something that judges should consider in sentencing policy. They consider things like retribution, rehabilitation, isolation of the person away from the community, sending a message to the community. And what type of message does it send to let someone off the hook who calls the jury retarded? It's disturbing, right? Unfortunately, she did a very foolish thing by saying these things on a recorded jail line. Hannah calls Carrie a bitch and that she was testifying out of spite. Hannah thinks the judge is getting paid off and thinks she deserves credit for being respectful. She is mad because she isn't going to get bail. Accusing the jury of being the R word, calling the judge, saying that the judge is getting paid off. All of these are ways to really piss off the person who is about to sentence you. And some of you are going to say the judge should put their personal feelings aside, and they should. However, this could be indicative of, aside from the judge's personal feelings, a lack of remorse. And this person wants to have guns. Hannah wants to have guns. Does she want to then return to being an armorer or being responsible for firearms? And could this same lack of seriousness lead to her causing the death of someone else? So that's something the courts have to consider. Deterrence, keeping people from doing things like that in the future, retribution, punishing someone for what they did, rehabilitation, making someone better. Certainly, these jail calls have shown that during the period that Hannah was incarcerated, between when she was convicted and when she went to sentencing, she was not rehabilitated. And so if you see jail as an opportunity for rehabilitation, they might keep you in there a bit longer because you weren't rehabilitated by the short stay that you had. Carmela tells Hannah, I don't trust Carrie to not be recording these calls. I don't trust that bitch. Hannah says that if she had to stay in jail longer, that she is down for prison. Hannah says there is more to do in prison and talks about going to Springer where she could ride horses. So she's saying, I would rather be in prison than be in jail because there's more that I can do. That's actually a common thing that people believe, that there's more programs in prison than there are in jail because it's a more long-term stay than a jail is. So there's more things to do there, but it's not better. Prison is worse than jail. Only people that don't really know and are listening to jailhouse lawyers actually think that prison is worse than jail, much worse. And it's usually way farther away from your family and loved ones. Those jail calls and visits start to really dry up and it becomes extremely isolating. So she's in for a rude awakening. They talk about using her father's leukemia to keep her out of prison. They want to say that her and her mom are the only people who can help her dad. Hannah talks about her publicist and how it is time to make some statement from him. They talk about how it might work if Hannah says that she is the sole caretaker of her father. Hannah says jail isn't too bad and that some parts of it are just fine. So what is the prosecutor going to ask for to keep her in jail? They talk about how Hannah can do that time standing on her head. Hannah talks about her statement to the judge. I want to say that standing on her head, that's a common jailhouse phrase. That's how you know she's kind of getting institutionalized at this point in time. That's what people say when they've been incarcerated for a period of time. I can do that time standing on my head. It's a coping mechanism. It really shouldn't be held against people when they say that. It's a way that they are mentally preparing themselves for a longer prison stay. However, it doesn't sound good on the other side of it. If you're on the prosecution side of it or you're the judge, it doesn't sound like you're very remorseful. Hannah talks about her statement to the judge. Mong talks about the saying something to the judge, and Carmela apparently told her that she can say whatever she wants at sentencing, and the worst that can happen is spending a couple of days in jail. So we already know that the paralegal for her attorney is telling her, we only anticipate you getting a couple of days in jail. And I could see why they would think that because she has a very limited criminal history and she's not the only one in the chain of events that led to Helena's death, right? She was important, but she was not the only one. However, judges don't like to hear that. Okay. Oh, you're only going to get a little bit of time. Here's another problem. She's discussing her sentencing strategy, which came from her attorney's paralegal, which came from her attorney, with her mom on the recorded jail call, which means she is leaking to everyone, the public, anyone who's going to listen to these jail calls, her private conversations with her attorney. If this conversation was just with her attorney, that would be fine. But she's the one that keeps the attorney-client privilege. The client is the one who's in control of whether or not to disclose the attorney-client privilege. And so by her telling her mom and friends what her attorney and her attorney's paralegal, who is also part of her attorney's litigation team, is telling her, she's disclosing her trial strategy to the prosecution, and they're able to listen to it because she's voluntarily regurgitating what her attorney has told her. Highly inadvisable for clients to do that. Do not talk about what your attorney or your attorney's secretary or paralegal have told you to your family members or friends on the recorded jail call, because now you're disclosing attorney confidences. Hannah says the jury didn't look at the evidence and the jury are assholes. So she's called the jury assholes, the R word, all types of stuff. Hannah says the people that testified against her just wanted to talk shit and she got railroaded. Carrie lied in her closing statement. Hannah wants to go after people for libel. Hannah is mad that the whole thing got pinned on her. Hannah says that the jail is good character development. No. This is extremely naive. People that go to jail and make the best of the situation, my hats off and ultimate kudos go to those people. I am so proud of you. If you have gone to jail and you've turned your life around. But for many people, going to jail is a major disruptor in their life. They lose their jobs, they lose their homes, they lose their loved ones and relatives. Family members pass away while people are incarcerated. If they're young, they're no longer getting real education. They're just kind of sitting there in a holding pattern, waiting to be released if they ever are going to be released. But this is a coping mechanism, right? It is not good character development. If you develop good character as a result of being incarcerated, it's because you were intentional about your incarceration and intentional about trying to become a better person. But it is not an automatic thing that's just going to happen just because you're out of the, outside world and society. She wants them to put Alec Baldwin in jail also. They may. Hannah asked mom to tell the judge about Fell's leukemia diagnosis and how she takes care of him when mom isn't there. This is dad. Hannah tells her mom what to say about how she takes care of Fell. So basically what the prosecution is doing with this whole group of conversations about the dad being sick and Hannah taking care of him is they're trying to say it's disingenuous. It's strategy. She's not actually taking care of her dad because they're discussing it not as though she's actually doing it, but as though this is what we're going to tell the judge in order to reduce my sentence. Hannah says the jury was so fucking stupid and they couldn't tell what was happening. She calls the jury fucking idiots. Hannah says she doesn't feel like she deserves to be there and the jail guards agree with her. Hannah thinks the judge got paid off. Multiple times in multiple phone calls, she's accused the judge of being paid off and the jury of being stupid. They talk about the call being recorded in another jail call and how they need to talk about people by their names instead of bitch. They complain about the time the jury took to deliberate and how they didn't look at the evidence. And I just want to be fair here. I understand that. It's very, very frustrating to lose a case and then the jury only took an hour, 2 hours to deliberate. You really want them to spend time with the evidence. Now, let's flip this on the other side. Say you're the prosecution. I've gotten a not done. Usually if it's a short period of deliberation, statistically speaking, it's usually a guilty, but that's not always the case, right? I recently had a case in which the jury deliberation was very short, maybe 30 to 45 minutes, and it was a not guilty. I am sure that after that not guilty, the prosecution was feeling like, well, they didn't consider all the evidence that I gave. There's no way they could have reviewed everything that I introduced. So on both sides suffer from being mad at how long the jury takes to deliberate, whether it's long or it's short, right? But they reached their decision and the court is going to respect their decision. We respect juries here in the United States. We respect their ultimate decisions. An appellate court could later on decide that they got something wrong. But usually when decisions are overturned on appeal, it's not for something the jury did. It's usually for something the judge did. Isn't that interesting? The judge has the more experience, the legal training, the knowledge. They're a lawyer with decades of experience normally. A jury has, by and large, usually no legal experience, right? Usually they're coming from somewhere else. Or if they are attorneys, this is not their area of practice if they end up on the jury, right? And so it can be very, very frustrating, very, 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 very frustrating to have these people that know nothing about the law decide your fate. And then you just have to accept it and respect it. But that's exactly what appellate courts up to the Supreme Court of the United States do. They respect the internal decisions of the jury. They're not going to get into their interpersonal deliberations because they want to respect the sanctity of the deliberation room. Okay. And so although she may be frustrated by it, you have to understand, and everyone has to understand, that ultimately the courts respect the juries. Okay. They talk about how she shouldn't be a felon and maybe they can get it knocked down to a misdemeanor. Hannah wants to bother the governor for the rest of her life so she can be pardoned. Hannah doesn't feel like she should be a felon because she has never been arrested. Hannah says the judge wanted to lock her up. Hannah and her mother talk about how the system failed her. I do want to talk about this. There's a certain level here with Hannah that is clear privilege, right? She's a privileged young woman who, because of nepotism, had her position as an armorer. All right. So because of that, Hannah may not realize that many of the people that are felons it's their first time interacting with the criminal justice system. A lot of people become felons off of their first criminal conviction. And a lot of times they become felons for handgun related offenses here in the United States. And they may think, I should be able to have a handgun, or I've never done anything bad before, I shouldn't be able to be a felon. And those thousands and thousands of people all across the country would never imagine getting pardoned by the governor. And that's not a viable option for them, right? And so I think this is kind of childish tantrum more than it is anything else, right? I think it's just indicative of a lack of worldly knowledge and sophistication, and being spoiled, right? Why she would say things like this. Hannah's mother says that Hannah should fight the biggest girl of the bunch that is causing problems. Once again, a lack of remorse, and probably something being said in jest. That is something, again, people frequently say about incarceration. Oh, you go in there and you fight the biggest person and then you'll get everyone's respect. Let me dissuade you. Anyone who is facing incarceration, do not do that. Stay to yourself, fly under the radar. Do not commit new crimes, because guess what? That can violate your probation. Yes, even if you have not started your probation yet, but you're in jail, you're awaiting to be released, and you start committing crimes, fighting people and beating them up while you're in there, you're going to run into some issues with the law. You can be charged with that. So I would not advise anyone to start fights in jail in order to come across like the tough guy. Not a good idea. Hannah says she got moved to 300. I'm assuming that's a unit in the jail. And it is fucking lit in here now. Hannah complains about the jail guards. Hannah was accused of passing notes of some male inmate and sparked some sort of investigation. So again, you're already breaking rules before you've even been sentenced. Not a good idea. Hannah says that she has Regina as a roommate and it's fun as fuck and not bad at all. Lack of remorse. Hannah says that she has a good day and fun with another inmate. Hannah says it's crazy good vibes today and everyone is having fun because they got their commissary. Hannah talks about some new medication she got that made her loopy. She talks about working out. She says she likes the new medication because it makes her feel high. And not good. You know, some of the implications in the case itself were that she was like this stoner who wasn't really paying attention and not really taking it seriously. And so someone died as a result, right? And so that is not great in the case itself. Hannah complains about the jury instructions and Hannah doesn't understand why she's in there. Hannah says that this whole thing has been a character attack on her. Next jail call. Hannah complains that she has all the fame of a public figure, but none of the benefits. Yes, because you're infamous, not famous. You're infamous, not famous, and that's when you get all of the attention of a famous person, but none of the benefits. Hannah says this is all she is going to be known for. Mom asks whether or not Hannah's friends and family are going to write letters for her. Hannah says she is nice and safe in jail. Hannah says that they, referring to law enforcement and the prosecution, don't even have all her supplies. So how could they pin it on her, and that it's reasonable doubt enough? They talk about how much of Hannah's life they could take up and that this is messing with her modeling career. Modeling career. Interesting. Priorities, girl. You're convicted for involuntary manslaughter. You're worried about your modeling career. Hannah is dismissive of the judge talking about someone dying as a result of her actions. Hannah talks about how, I don't want to just run past that. She's dismissive of the judge talking about someone dying as a result of her actions. That goes directly to the case, is directly relevant. And I think any judge would say you need to be in jail, right? Based on that. Hannah talks about how she is in good spirits. She says she really is fine in jail, and some days she really likes it in there. Next call. Hannah says the prosecution bored the jury for 9 days, and when the defense put their case, the jury was bored. They think that the jury must have been tampered with. They feel let down by the FBI. Hannah says if the whole thing wasn't so comical, she would be upset. Next call. Mom yells that Hannah didn't cause Helena's death, and Hannah agrees. Now, to be fair, she maintains her innocence. That's why she went to trial and doesn't think that her behavior on the set as armorer or her work or lack thereof as armorer caused the death of Helena. That's what she feels. I don't think the evidence bore that out. I think the evidence bore out that she was somewhat responsible, that she was the armorer, and that she should have ensured the safety of the gun, and she didn't. And so I disagree with Hannah on that, and I'm sure the judge and the prosecution and the jury disagree with Hannah on that. Does that mean that she should get more time? I don't know, but I think taking all these jail calls in their totality, I think it shows a lack of remorse, and I think justifies the judge giving her more time that I don't think she ultimately or she otherwise would have gotten. Hannah and her boyfriend talk about Hannah drinking and how she is mean to him when she drinks. Based on the timeline of their relationship, she had to have violated her conditions because there is another call where they talk about it being their 6-month anniversary. So this case has been pending for over a year. It had been their 6-month anniversary, and she was drinking and mean during their relationship. So the entire time of their relationship, she has been drinking, but she's not supposed to be drinking as a condition of her release. Not good. Hannah says she deserves a new trial and that this is bullshit. I mean, I don't think anything is wrong with the criminal defendant thinking that they deserve a new trial. I think there's something wrong with you expressing that this is bullshit over a recorded jail line when you know it's recorded, and she expressed that she knew that it was recorded. Hannah says she is looking at 13 months, which is ridiculous over what happened. She's looking at 18 months. Hannah thinks the paramedics should be in jail for intubating her wrong. Hannah says mom can also give Carrie 2 or 3 of her pay stubs to shut that bitch up. Oh my goodness. Talking about the prosecutor like that is terrible. Hannah tells mom to get the ones where she has 38 or 40 hours so it shows she has a full-time job and not the ones that show less. Hannah can't believe how many people are trying to ruin her. Hannah says everyone thinks it's crazy she got locked up with her history. Right. So that is the conventional wisdom. She has no criminal history. No one thought she was really going to get a lot of time in jail. It's the lack of remorse, but also someone died. So, and that keeps getting lost here. Helena Hutchins was killed as a result of Hannah's negligence. So, you know, Hannah complains that they literally put her in there with murderers. Hannah says, well, you are an involuntary manslaughterer. You're not much better than the so-called murderers. Hannah says that people have accidents and people die. It's an unfortunate part of life, but it doesn't mean she should be in jail. She says the medic on the set of Rust is a dumb bitch and should have been prepared. They talk about the paramedics taking too long, and she would still be here today, Helena, if they had done it right and not intubated her right. She calls the paramedics fucking idiots, fucking R-words, and mom says, how is that on you? So this is again with her disparaging comments to everyone but herself. So she just cannot take responsibility. And that's an interesting point in the law. A lot of people will think, okay, well, I might have done this bad thing or neglected something and then someone died, but you know, the hospital messed up, you know, they gave them the wrong medication or they intubated. If you put someone in the position that they needed to go to the hospital and they die as a result, 9 times out of 10, you're responsible for that, right? That is your responsibility because you injured that person or you did something to injure that person to the extent that they needed medical intervention. And a part of medical intervention, sometimes the medical professionals mess up, but they're not going to be on the hook for that. You are. Do not put someone in a position where they need medical intervention to save their life because you will be on the hook whether or not the paramedics get it right or not. So this is something that she clearly is having a hard time understanding, but also something I frequently see people say that they have a hard time understanding. So those are the jail calls from Hannah Gutierrez Reed. And I went through each individual one and how I think that led to her receiving the maximum possible penalty. And I just want to say here to you, please remember that anything, whether or not you've been charged with a crime, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. But certainly after you've been convicted, your statements are going to be used against you. And this is a problem I've seen with coworkers, clients, my own clients, other attorneys that I just know clients. Maybe it's just human nature. You want to reach out, you want to talk to somebody. Save the talk about your case for your conversation with your lawyer. Do not talk on the recorded jail line. And I know some of you guys are trying to say, oh, Natalie, you're just trying to help criminals get off. Well, no, I'm not, because sometimes things that people say can be misconstrued and they're not even necessarily even saying anything bad. Like, not everything she said was really that bad, but it all gets lumped in together and none of it helped her. And if you're not helping yourself, why are you talking? Just be quiet, right? Don't talk about your case on the recorded jail line. Don't talk about your case at all. Just be quiet. Talk to your attorney. Ask for your attorney at every single turn. Be quiet unless your attorney tells you to talk. All right, so I hope that this video was helpful to you guys. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I'll see you later. Bye.